He was a young boy, bright-eyed and so full of life with a bright future ahead of him. But when a director spots him and tries to make him a star, it ends up being the beginning of the end for Cory Haim, a roller coaster ride that led to his downfall and one of the saddest tragedies in entertainment. So, how did it all go so wrong? Let's go back in time to the early 80s. A young Cory Haim is just tagging along with his sister Carrie to her auditions. Totally normal, right? But then, in a twist that feels straight out of a movie, someone spots Cory, and, just like that, he starts landing roles as a child actor. It all kicked off with some commercials in 1981, but soon enough, he found himself playing a regular role in the Edison Twins, a fun Canadian kids show. But here's what you may not know. Cory Haim, believe it or not, was actually a really shy kid growing up. It's hard to picture that. A future Hollywood star who got nervous around people? But that was Cory. Super quiet, a little awkward, and definitely not the type you'd expect to be craving the spotlight. He didn't even want to be an actor at first. Cory was more into playing hockey, totally content with being on the ice rather than in front of a camera. But things really got wild when Cory made his big screen debut in the 1984 thriller Firstborn. Now, this wasn't just any little part. He played a boy whose family is terrorized by his mom's scary, violent boyfriend, played by Peter Weller. Talk about being thrown into the deep end. But here's where things get intense. Cory's first day on set? It was horrible. After a take, Cory tried to be friendly with everyone around him. Little did he know he would soon come to regret that. He tried to give Weller a friendly compliment, but instead of a thanks kid, Weller grabbed him by the collar, slammed him against a wall, and told him not to speak to him after takes. Mind you, in all of these, Cory was only 13 at the time. It was so intense that 3 assistants had to jump in and pull them apart. Cory later admitted that the whole experience scared the daylights out of him, and who could blame him? But it turns out Peter Weller was deep into method acting, and he later apologized, explaining that he was just really into the character. Definitely not your typical first day on the job experience. Oh, and there's more. Cory's co-star in Firstborn was none other than a young Sarah Jessica Parker. He was just 10 at the time, and one day at a crew party, feeling emotional, Cory started crying. Who steps in to comfort him? Sarah Jessica Parker and Robert Downey Jr., Hollywood royalty. Cory remembered Robert telling him, "You're coming to live with me." Not your everyday co-star bonding moment, but definitely one for the books. But all of these roles were all well and good. However, only one role really exploded the name Cory Haim, and that was his breakout role in the 1986 film, Lucas. In the film, he played the lovable, awkward underdog who falls for a girl way out of his league, and audiences fell for him just as hard. He was no longer just a shy kid. He was the next big teen heart throb. Girls everywhere were posting him on their walls, and his fame began to spread. After the movie came out, for the first time in his life, Cory realized he now had star power. Now that he was famous, all eyes were on him, dying to see the next role he would play and what film he would do next. Soon enough, his fans had their wishes come true. His next movie was The Lost Boys in 1987, the movie that cemented his status as an 80s icon. Playing alongside Corey Feldman, Haim was part of a duo that fans went crazy for, so much so that the two Corys became a brand of its own. They were best friends both on and off screen, starring together in hit after hit like License to Drive, 1988, and Dream a Little Dream, 1989. He was living the dream. Big movies, bigger paychecks, and a massive fan base. One Cory was enough to get them crazy, but with two Corys in one movie, his audience skyrocketed. But just as he was reveling in his newfound success, there was a dark cloud, and a flip side to this coin life had tossed at him. You see, just as his fame skyrocketed, so did the pressure. The Hollywood party scene caught up with Cory, and soon he found himself in a situation he never thought he'd be in. Cory's life took a sharp turn after his success in License to Drive. He later admitted that this film was a major breaking point for him, a time when his addiction to drugs really started to take hold. And after all he was being put through, He needed an outlet to escape. Fame was really overwhelming, and he usually found himself craving for some peace and quiet. You'd think after all that success, life would be smooth sailing, but it wasn't. In fact, right after the movie came out, Cory found himself on stage at Knott's Berry Farm for a teen anti-drug campaign. The place was packed with screaming fans, mostly teenage girls, who were losing their minds over him. Things got so out of control that fire marshals had to step in and escort him out for his own safety. Can you imagine? Instead of enjoying the moment, Cory was absolutely terrified and vowed never to step on stage again. And these were the kinds of things that made him heavily reliant on drugs, but by now, he was hooked and in dire need of help. Cory Haim's battle with substance abuse was a long and tragic part of his life. He started at the age of 13, and just a few years after, as you'd expect, things were already spiraling. It all began innocently enough. He was drinking beer on the set of Lucas in 1985, and by the next year, things took a rather dramatic turn. He had started trying marijuana while filming The Lost Boys, but at this point, it was just a little indulgent, nothing too dangerous. Sadly, things didn't stay like this. By the time he filmed for License to Drive, he too admitted he has passed a tipping point and become fully into drug addiction. And just to be clear, he hated this. He wanted to stop, to become better, to be a changed man, but it was just too hard. But that did not stop Cory from at least trying to make an effort, so his first move was to try to quit. But here's where things get interesting. After a family vacation in 1989, Haim told the press he had been clean for a month. But staying sober all that time was no easy task. And as a matter of fact, Cory was not the only one involved in keeping himself clean. He had some help. Brooke McCarter, a fellow actor from The Lost Boys, actually stepped in to manage Haim and keep him clean. But it was no easy task. As a matter of fact, McCarter's girlfriend at the time, Julia Phillips, who saw all the efforts to keep Cory sane and off the drugs, described it as babysitting in her memoir. She loved Haim, but also found him frustratingly manipulative, noting how he could easily charm people twice his age. By the time Haim was filming Without Malice in 2000, his erratic behavior and health issues were more apparent. He would reportedly stop filming to call Toronto, worried about his dog, and he frequently needed emergency prescriptions to cope with sudden medical incidents. As you can imagine, Haim's struggle led to repeated attempts at rehab. He sought treatment 15 times. Unfortunately, he didn't just rely on rehab. He started abusing prescription medication too. But in 2001, things took a dark turn. Haim's mother found him unconscious at his home. He was rushed to the hospital and doctors managed to save him, but it was a close call. His friend and Lost Boys co-star, Corey Feldman, shared that Haim had made multiple suicide attempts and overdosed so many times that it became a terrifying routine. Feldman even recalled moments where he had to force-feed Haim charcoal to save him. At one point, Haim became so isolated that he didn't leave his apartment for 3.5 years, during which he gained a significant amount of weight, going from 150 pounds to over 300. But 3 years later, everything changed. By 2004, it seemed like there was a glimmer of hope. With the help of his mother, Haim moved back to Toronto. Apparently, he was overcoming his drug habit and creating a better life for himself. For the first time in a long time, Cory was taking back control. Now to show you how serious he was about this. He was even making efforts to rebrand himself before now. You see, by late 1989, Cory was trying to get his life back on track. However, the challenges in his life made it incredibly difficult. Fresh out of rehab, he released a self-promotional video called Cory Haim, Me, Myself, and I, which was supposed to show a day in his life. But the whole thing felt off. The video was heavily scripted, yet Cory seemed out of it, and people watching couldn't help but wonder if he was under the influence while filming. It was so bad that some people even called it the worst movie ever. Despite this, Cory wanted to help others struggling with addiction. He set up a pre-recorded advice line for teens dealing with drug issues. But in a brutally honest moment on the Arsenio Hall show, he admitted that he was high while recording those messages, Talk about heartbreaking. By 19, he was starring in films like Dream Machine, The Double O Kid, with Seth Green, and Blown Away, none of which made it to the big screen. Seth Green later talked about his experience working with Cory, describing it as a heartbreaking mix. Cory could be sweet, professional, and passionate about acting one moment, but then the next, he was tormented by his addiction. In fact, on the set of Blown Away, Cory was dating co-star Nicole Eggert, who shared some gut-wrenching memories of that time. She talked about how medics on set would keep Cory going, preventing him from going into withdrawal. They'd shoot during the day, but at night, Nicole would be with him in the emergency room, hooked up to IVs, begging doctors for different medications to get him through to the next day. But things got much worse. In the mid-90s, Cory Haim's life hit some major bumps. After pulling out of the movie Paradise Bar in 1996, things started to spiral. Lloyd's of London sued him for $375,000. Why? Well, the reason was shocking. It was simply because he hadn't mentioned his drug addiction on the insurance forms. Big mistake, as he would soon realize. Lloyd's of London is an insurance market known for insuring big Hollywood stars and their projects. In Cory's case, Lloyd's of London insured him, but they later found out that he hadn't disclosed a critical detail on the insurance forms: his drug addiction. This was considered a pre-existing medical condition, something that could have affected their decision to insure him or led to higher premiums. So, when he pulled out of the movie, Lloyd sued him for $375,000, accusing him of not being honest about his addiction, which was a serious issue for them because it directly impacted his ability to work. By July 1997, Cory was in such deep financial trouble that he had to file for bankruptcy. The bankruptcy report painted a pretty rough picture. He owed $100,000 to the IRS, had another $100,000 in debts, and his listed assets were shockingly low. He only had $100 in cash, a red 1987 Alfa Romeo Spider, some clothes worth about $750, and a small pension and royalty rights. But little did he know, this was just the beginning. Just like that, his life began to fall apart in ways no one would ever imagine. The challenges that followed is proof that Cory was superhuman for going through all he did. With his finances in shambles, Cory's film roles started to disappear, and this was like the end of his career and household name. But he had to stay relevant somehow, and if big roles didn't come for him, he would go for the low-hanging fruits, low-budget movies. They didn't pay all the bills, but at least they kept the lights on. 1999 was one of the first low-budget movies he took on. It was an indie film called Universal Groove in Montreal, where he played a film director in the techno club scene. It sounded like a cool project at the time, and it got some buzz from the local press. This was good, right? At least, things were beginning to pick up. Wrong! This is where things went terribly wrong. Like many things in Cory's later career, the movie didn't go smoothly. Post-production was a disaster, and parts of the film were even stolen and leaked online. It wasn't until years later that a version of the movie finally got released. 8 years later, to be exact. In 2000, Cory tried to make a comeback with the direct-to-video thriller Without Malice, where he played an ex-addict caught up in a murder cover-up. He was hoping this role would help him break away from his teen heartthrob image. But even though the movie was shot in scenic Saskatchewan, Cory's off-screen behavior, like spending late nights at the local bar, didn't help his case. By 2001, things weren't looking great. Cory was featured on True Hollywood Story, and the episode showed him living in a small apartment with his mom. He appeared confused and barely coherent in some of the interviews. He even went to a pawnbroker begging for $3 to buy a slice of pizza. Pretty heartbreaking stuff. Corey Feldman, his longtime friend, tried to step in and help by letting him move in. Around the same time, the two spent a few days at Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch, which made headlines, but didn't change the course of Cory's struggles. Despite it all, Cory was determined to pick his life back on and keep forging forward. he was not going to let his situation define his life. And as far as he was concerned, he was going to make some effort for a comeback. So first, he made a cameo in David Spade's Dickie Roberts, former child star, where he joined other former child stars in poking fun at their pasts. He also appeared in a spoof horror movie, The Backlot Murders, and even guest starred on the Canadian show Big Wolf on Campus. In 2004, Cory was the subject of a song by the Irish band The Thrills titled, "Whatever Happened to Cory Haim?" Zrania, a nod to the questions many people had about his once promising career. Despite the setbacks, Cory's name remained etched in pop culture, a reminder of both his talent and his struggles. But, sadly, just 4 years after, the unimaginable happened. On March 10th, 2010, tragedy struck when Cory Haim's mother made a frantic 911 call. Paramedics rushed him from their home to Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, but by the time they arrived, it was too late. Haim was pronounced dead at 2:15 a.m. He was just 38 years old. In the days leading up to his death, Haim had been suffering from flu-like symptoms, but nothing seemed serious enough to warrant alarm. Even his doctor, after checking his temperature, didn't suspect anything dire. Then, that fateful morning, as he tried to get out of bed, Haim collapsed. At first, the police believed it was an accidental overdose. They found bottles of prescription medications, Valium, Vicodin, Soma, and haloperidol, at the scene. But as investigators dug deeper, it became clear that Haim had been doctor shopping, using fake names to acquire more than 550 prescription pills in the month leading up to his death. Despite these findings, Haim's agent insisted that Cory had been making efforts to stay clean. The agent said Haim had been completely drug-free for 2 weeks before his death. However, his primary doctor later confirmed to DEA investigators that Haim was still battling an addiction to painkillers, making his untimely death all the more heartbreaking. And so, the life of a natural-born star was cut off before his time. So, what do you think about all of these? Was Haim's truly trying to get clean? Or is there more to this story? Let us know in the comments.